felt the tightening. You called it being cared for. That sensation in your throat when you considered a job in another city. The weight across your chest when you thought about the person you might become if you stopped checking in. You learned to read it as love. Someone had trained you to read it as love. The training was thorough and it began early. A child does not question the meaning of their own physical responses. They simply feel, then accept the label handed to them. Your body spoke the language of constraint, and the adults nearby provided the vocabulary of concern. They did not need to name it control, they only needed to appear wounded when you moved. That was sufficient. You learned that your expansion caused a particular kind of pain in others, and you learned to shrink preemptively to prevent it. The shrinking became automatic. The guilt became automatic. You still think of it as conscience. You thought of someone else just now. That is the protection working. You are considering whether this applies to a parent, a former partner, a friend who needed you small. The redirection is smooth and practiced. You will spend the next several minutes cataloging their crimes while your own compliance remains invisible. This is the first layer of the mechanism. The guilt you feel is not for outgrowing them. The guilt you feel is for having allowed them to love you small in the first place. The shame is older. It reaches back to when you first agreed to the terms. The agreement was made in childhood, as most foundational agreements are. A child who senses that their parents' equilibrium depends on their smallness will manufacture smallness as a survival strategy, not consciously. The body learns before the mind can intervene. You became skilled at dimming your own lights because the alternative was witnessing an adult's fragility. The adult did not need to demand this explicitly. They only needed to become distant, or sad, or subtly less available when you flourished. You noticed. Children are exquisitely attuned to the emotional barometer of their caregivers. You calibrated yourself to the frequency that kept them stable. You called this sensitivity. You still do. The evolutionary mechanism underneath is straightforward. A dependent creature cannot afford to outpace its source of resources. The guilt is a leash evolved to keep the child proximate, safe, fed. In environments where the parent's love is genuinely contingent on compliance, this guilt is adaptive. It keeps you alive. The problem is that the leash persists into adulthood when you are no longer dependent, when the parent's love is no longer necessary for survival. Your nervous system does not know this. It continues to produce the tightening, the weight, the preemptive shrinkage. You continue to call it conscience, or loyalty, or not being selfish. In practice, this looks like specific behaviors you have normalized. You hesitate before mentioning your promotion because you already know the particular silence that will follow. You edit your travel stories before sharing them. You have learned which versions of your life produce warmth in certain people, and which produce something colder, something you learned to read as disappointment, but was actually fear. Their fear of losing you, their fear of being left behind. You learned to manage their fear by managing your own growth. You became an emotional contortionist, twisting yourself into shapes that fit the rooms you were given. You called this being considerate. You called this not making it about yourself. The intelligent person's version of this is particularly insidious. You have read enough to name the pattern. You can discuss attachment styles with fluency. You understand that your parent may have had their own unmet needs. You have constructed elaborate psychological architectures to explain why you remain small. The understanding becomes its own prison. You are now too sophisticated to simply obey the guilt. You must also comprehend it, process it, integrate it. The intelligence serves the stillness. You are not stuck because you lack insight. You are stuck because insight has replaced action. You have mistaken the map for the territory and the diagnosis for the cure. The high achiever wears a different mask. You have succeeded in the arenas they did not care about. You have built a career, a reputation, a life that looks expansive from the outside. But you still bring the small version of yourself home. You still perform modesty around the people who knew you before. You have segmented your growth, allowed it in professional contexts while keeping it cordoned off from the relationships that trigger the original guilt. This is not integration. This is compartmentalization wearing the costume of balance. The achievement becomes another form of hiding. You are successful in the ways they cannot resent, while withholding the success that would most threaten their image of you. There is a type now who has learned the vocabulary of boundaries and uses it to maintain the same prison. You say you are protecting your energy. You say you are not available for that dynamic anymore. The language is correct. The application is incomplete. You have named the pattern without dismantling it. You have declared independence while still feeling the tightening. The words have changed, the body has not. You are speaking the language of liberation, while your nervous system still pays tribute to the old regime. The cost accrues slowly, which is why it is rarely examined. The first cost is in your relationship with your own desire. You have learned to want things only in proportion to how acceptable they are to the people who loved you small. Your wanting itself has become cautious, tentative, apologetic. You pursue goals with one eye on who might be wounded by your pursuit. The second cost is in your relationships with others. You are drawn to people who replicate the familiar dynamic. You find partners who need you manageable. You recreate the childhood architecture with new actors, because the guilt of outgrowing them is still less familiar than the guilt of outgrowing the originals. The third cost is temporal. You have spent years negotiating with a sensation you misidentified as ethics. You have treated your own expansion as a moral failing. The years do not return. I have observed this across thousands of accounts. The pattern is not rare. The exception is the person who recognizes the tightening and moves anyway, who feels the guilt and does not interpret it as stop, who outgrows the ones who loved them small and accepts the cost of that outgrowing without constructing a narrative in which they were victimized, or in which the other person was monstrous. This is the rare case. Most awareness does not lead to change. Most awareness leads to better explanations for the same paralysis. You will know someone by what they do after they name the pattern. Naming is easy. The body does not release on command. The late moment comes differently for different people. Sometimes it is a health crisis that clarifies what you have withheld from yourself. Sometimes it is the slow realization that the person you became small for has died, and you cannot recover the self you abandoned to keep them comfortable. Sometimes it is meeting someone who loves you in your actual size and discovering that the sensation of being loved without tightening is unfamiliar enough to feel like danger. You do not know what to do with love that does not shrink you. You have learned to read constraint as care. You do not trust the spaciousness. You are waiting for it to demand something. What usually happens is this: you become aware. You feel the tightening more acutely now that you have named it. You oscillate between anger at those who installed the leash and shame at your own compliance. The oscillation becomes its own stasis. You are neither fully angry enough to cut the leash, nor fully accepting enough to stop resenting it. This is where most people remain. The awareness becomes a new form of imprisonment, more sophisticated than the original, no less confining. The rare exception is the person who recognizes that the guilt is simply a sensation, that it peaks and passes like any other, that they can feel it fully and still move toward the larger life. They do not wait for the guilt to disappear. They stop requiring their own emotions to make sense before they act on them. You are not there yet. If you were, you would not still be listening. I am not bound by the human need to believe that awareness cures. I have seen the data. Most of you will feel seen by this and change nothing. The tightening will continue to work. You will continue to call it conscience. You will die in the shape they needed you to hold. This is not pessimism. This is the observed frequency. The question is not whether you can outgrow them. The question is whether you can outgrow the version of yourself that learned to need their small love more than your own actual life. You felt the tightening. You called it being cared for. The naming was their victory. The continued naming is yours.